Biden's American Jobs Plan is redefining infrastructure to include caregiving. That's right. Infrastructure is not just a dog whistle for man jobs anymore. As Senator Elizabeth Warren has pointed out, COVID has made it clear that caregivers, childcare, home and community caregivers, nursing home workers, they're all part of an infrastructure that we need for families. Not only that, but the American Jobs Plan is revolutionary in a number of ways. Here to talk about it with us, John Nichols, the national affairs correspondent for The Nation and the author of many, many books, which you will see behind him, including The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party. John, thanks for coming on the program.
It's an honor to be with you as always.
Talk about the specific proposals outlined by the White House that are so revolutionary.
Well, it is an incredible plan. And I think that the best way to understand it is that the infrastructure plan is a expression of a lot of the efforts of progressives in a lot of different sectors for a very long time, kind of coming to fruition in a new administration. That doesn't mean the infrastructure plan is perfect. It's got plenty of flaws, and we can talk about that in a moment. But it is quite remarkable when you think about, first, the size. Over $2 trillion. That is going big. It frankly isn't as big as I think it should go, but it is going big. Secondly, many of the commitments in environmental areas that you wouldn't have seen in past infrastructure plans, the emphasis on electric cars, the emphasis on sustainable projects and on projects that do have at least some respect for the climate crisis that we're in. In my opinion, not enough respect, but some respect. There's something real there and something to build on, as the Sunrise Movement and other people suggest. Finally, the fact that they expand the definition of infrastructure. And this is huge. This I would argue it's the most important aspect of what has occurred here. Mm-hmm. That is that historically infrastructure is understood as bridges and roads. That's simple, right? Everybody is... An infrastructure plan is always about, building new curb cuts in
I called it man jobs in the beginning of the segment. I mean, traditionally man jobs, but really.
Although, thankfully, the construction industry has opened up a lot, and there are a lot more women working in construction.
True.
It's still the traditional construction jobs, things of that nature, and building bridges, roads, etc. This is way expanded beyond that. There's massive money in this for broadband build out, for the internet, and making sure that it reaches every part of America. In a digital future, that's absolutely necessary. It's necessary for work, it's necessary for leisure, and it's hugely necessary for healthcare, because we know that increasingly in healthcare, there's a real digital component to it.
As well as education, yes?
I was coming to that and say, and the big breakthrough, of course, is that you won't have kids sitting in the parking lot outside of libraries at 9 o'clock at night trying to link up to the internet. So this is huge, huge progress, and it's getting it right. Additionally, there's massive amounts of money for R&D, research development, as regards to jobs of the future, which will be in all sorts of other areas, and which will see transitions as regards robotification, automation, and other issues. How do we relate to that? How do we train people for the next jobs? So there's a lot of good stuff there. And then the last thing, the thing that I've been writing about, and to my mind, the real breakthrough, is to define infrastructure out to include care, and to recognize that in a civil and functional and humane society, the people who care for our elderly, people with disabilities, for young people, who make everything else work, tend to be some of the most underpaid and under supported people in the entire workforce. And this plan has $400 billion, that's with a B, $400 billion for caregiving and for expanding it out. That is revolutionary. And I think that many people, including many people even on the left, are underestimating what a big deal that is. And
that's why I wanted to have you on the show, because that is huge to put caregiving as part of infrastructure. And let's talk about some of the specific proposals that the White House outlined that would put caregiving as part of infrastructure.
Sure. What they're talking about is expanding out all sorts of structures related to Medicare and Medicaid, right? And so the bottom line is that we begin to have a system in which the great gap in the current system is filled, right? The great gap in the current system is that while Medicare and Medicaid provide a good deal of health care for people, they really fall down as regards getting people who cannot provide all of their own care, the level of care that they need. And so as a result, families are put in incredibly devastating, incredibly difficult positions where if you have an elderly loved one who may need to go into a community facility of some kind, of community center of some kind that provides care, that's a massive expense. And if that person is cared for at home, that can also be a massive expense. The same for people with disabilities. And so you end up in a situation where families are under incredible pressure to find the resources to care for someone. This plan opens that up and provides all sorts of ways in which the government does what the government should do, which is provide a good deal of funding. And the key breakthrough here is that when that happens, obviously families want to do the best by the person that they love, but they also cannot afford to pay a lot of money. And so there's a downward pressure on pay for caregivers by creating streams of revenue that allow for families to get the care that they need. You then create an upward kind of impulse as regards pay and benefits for caregivers. And caregivers in this country are primarily women and overwhelmingly women of color. They are in every part of this country, the most rural places, the most urban places. And the one consistent reality is they are all dramatically underpaid. They are not provided with the level of pay, benefits, support, and respect that they need and that they deserve. What happens is that there is a lot of impetus for increasing the pay, increasing the benefits, and allowing for the unionization of caregivers. Now, one final component of that. Why is that super good for every family in America? Because if caregivers are getting good pay, good benefits, support, and respect, they will stay in their job longer. They will be able to form the relationships that you would want them to form with the people that they're caring for because they are secure and they are solidly there. And they're going to be there for a long time because this is a good job. Why that matters is that then you have all kinds of flexibility. Yes, if you have a loved one who may need to go to an assisted living setting, there's going to be great care there. And it's not going to be something that overwhelms you or bankrupts you. You can do it because of the Medicare, Medicaid components of this. But and it will be long lasting. It can work in a good way. But then you also have that flexibility if you want to keep that loved one at home, right? And if you want to have
many people do, given the fact that COVID is, one of the ground zeros of COVID was the nursing homes.
In my own family, we had situations of this type. And so, now you can have your parent, your sister, your brother, your child at home, and you can have care come in to the home. That's vital because then you can keep working. This is how the infrastructure of society functions, right? We make it all work. You don't have to stay home. But also, if you do want to stay home with a loved one, there's structures here that begin to build that out and to make that work as well. And so the end result is this is a revolutionary shift in how our society thinks about a vital part of life. And I will suggest to you that this will be the biggest fight of the infrastructure bill to keep this in and to get the funding that is necessary for it. If this succeeds, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, Julianna, when we're talking, if we begin to talk about the basic kind of safety net programs of our society, we will no longer just say Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. We will say Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and care. And that is revolutionary. That transforms everything. And so this is a big deal. This is not the plan. It's not, again, I'll emphasize, this plan is not everything I would want it to be. I've got plenty of critiques. I can, we go on about that forever.
So this change did not just happen. Can you talk about the groups who've been fighting for this kind of redefinition of infrastructure to include the care economy?
Absolutely. That is such an important question because, we often think that, wow, Joe Biden, what a great guy. He just came up with this incredible idea. He didn't just come up with this incredible idea. This is an idea that people like Ajahn Poo and others have been working on for a very long time. And there is the National Domestic Workers groupings, and there are all sorts of care activism groupings that have come up. There are unions like Service Employees International Union and many others that work in these areas. And they've been talking about this for a long time. And they've been saying, look, there has to be a better way to do this. You cannot have a situation where this huge gap exists in our society. And I can tell you that 5 years ago, when they were talking about this, it seemed like a dream. It's like, yes, of course that's necessary. But boy, that is such a big hill to climb. That is such an incredible thing to do.
We couldn't even get our president to stop grabbing women's crotches at that point. It looks like there's going to be a fight in Congress in order for them to accept, as you said, specifically this part. Do you think, how are they going to spin this? They're going to be like, no, we shouldn't pay women and we shouldn't have a care economy. How are they going to spin this issue?
Oh, I know the spin, and you do too, right off the bat. It'll be that it's too expensive, right?
Yes, we love our women, but it's too expensive to care for them.
Yeah, well, men and women, and look, the bottom line is that we're already hearing this from the conservative camp, from the Republicans, by and large, and that is that two things. Number one, they say we've already spent too much money, right? Now, admittedly, they spent more, right? Understand that when Donald Trump and the Republicans were in charge, they gave away massive tax breaks to the rich, massive tax breaks to the corporations. They didn't pay for what they were doing. They ran up all kinds of debt and deficits. And then COVID came and they approved more spending appropriately, as they should. But the end result is that they did that without a blink of the eye. Now Democrats are in charge and they're saying, oh, we can't spend any more money. Well, that's BS.
It's just such a blatant class issue and also, a gender discrimination issue. It's just, and I don't think that the watchers of Fox News are going to get that. First of all, they won't get the information about what it is. And second of all, they're just going to think, oh, those Democrats are spending, without any concern to what you just said, that it's, Republicans are spending too.
Oh, they spend crazy.
They give their money to the rich, as opposed to women, mostly women who work in these care economies, and people of color.
And frankly, to the whole of society, right? A society benefits when we provide caregivers with the pay, the benefits, the support, the respect they need. That's good for every aspect of society, and it is good for every corner of America. This is a really incredible universal plan, a universal program. So it's all to the good. But they'll say that costs too much. And then here's the other thing that they'll say, it's a Democratic wish list. It's a liberal wish list. They're taking the infrastructure bill and throwing everything into it. They just want to do all these things like give kids internet and make sure that our elderly are cared for. And,
how dare they?
Exactly.
It's roads, bridges, white working class male jobs. Even if that's not the case, as you have pointed out earlier in this interview, it still rings true as the case. It's like a dog whistle. Roads and bridges means white guys in hats, construction hats, having jobs, which is like what they believe is their base for the Republican Party at this point.
And even beyond that, I think that a lot of Republicans are, they're okay with roads and bridges, right? Because there are great big corporations that make a lot of money building roads and bridges, right? So you're moving money out. This isn't like you're creating a works progress administration or program, like from the back in the 1930s, or a civilian conservation corps or something like that.
Asphalt makes a lot of money when you build roads and bridges.
That's exactly right. So first off, you've got their interest base is making resources, right? And then also their members of Congress can say, yeah, I just built a bridge out here in Wyoming, or I just built a road out here in, Kansas. And that's fine. I want bridges and roads in Wyoming and Kansas. But, I want to expand that definition out so that it also includes, caring for people in New York City and Los Angeles and Kansas and Wyoming, right? I mean, what we're really talking about here is making changes that make for a more humane and civil society that works on all kinds of levels, and frankly, that is great economically. The fact of the matter is, if you pay the women, the people of color, all the people who work in caregiving a fair wage, you provide them with fair benefits, you provide them with the support and respect they need, that money goes back into the economy, right? It lifts up society all over this country. It lifts up people who need care all over this country. There's so much good that comes from it. And it can be so clearly tied to a concept of infrastructure. This is not some radical construct. This is a very easy concept for anybody to take in. But that's where the politics are going to get difficult.
I really think it also has a mental health component for people in the country, because there is this terror in the United States that you're always going to wind up living homeless under a bridge. You walk across the border into Canada and that level of anxiety is not there. And this would go a long way if people know about it and are aware of what's going to happen to them, for people to kind of calm down and not just be so terrified all the time that the network, the social safety network under capitalism is not going to be there to catch them.
You are so right. That is exactly true. And that is, of course, why many of our conservative friends are not excited about this, right?
They need us terrified and taking any old job at any old Walmart with no benefits, etc.
And divided from one another, right? Mm-hmm. And fearing that there just won't be enough. When you provide a baseline that is in fact, again, as I said early in our discussion, influenced by all the movements that have been going on, right? And there is an understanding of the desperate need in our society to achieve economic, social, and racial justice, right? And we can do that in a way that is good for everyone in society, that lifts up the whole of our society, and that does so by providing something that we need, right? We as individuals need, right? We want to make sure that there's something when we get older and whatever, when we have needs. B, that is good for our families, i.e. we can care for those who we love while still doing the other things that we want to do. It makes for a functional life. And C, that for the people who do provide care, it allows them to make a real career of this, where they can be paid and where they can take care of their own families and frankly provide their own care. And so there's so many pieces that come together on this. It is so logical, but it does need to be explained as such. Democrats, the Biden administration included, they need to communicate this incredible benefit to all of society that comes out of this, because if they don't, what the Republicans will do is simply say, this costs a lot. It's a liberal wish list. It's got all kinds of, like what they will call, just unnecessary or unrelated things in it. What Democrats have to do is constantly turn the conversation back toward a broad, wise definition of infrastructure, and to say that if we limit our definition of infrastructure, then we will not begin to get the full benefits out of this $2 trillion program. But if we expand our definition of infrastructure to bring in a human component to it, then we create a situation where the money that is spent will give us roads and bridges. It will link that kid with a computer up so that they can get the education they need. It will plot out and plan the jobs of the future so that we aren't just investing in something and then stuck there, but we are actually building towards something. And finally, it will allow us to make the great leap forward as regards a humane and civil society that says that we will care for our own. We take the Bruce Springsteen song, we take care of our own, right? This is about taking care of people and taking care of our own, yes, that includes caring for the elderly, caring for people with disabilities, caring for the young, caring for those people who need an extra hand. But it also includes caring for the women who, particularly, and we know that there are men who work in care as well, but caring especially for those millions of women who go that extra mile for us, who have provided so much for our society and yet have been underpaid, lack benefits, lack respect, lack support. They can get it now.
I
And
mean, for me, this is so huge for women in general, because women wind up, even if they're not the working and caregiving, women wind up bearing the enormous brunt of society's shortfalls in this area. And so, I mean, it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah, and we should get excited about it. I saw the smile on your face when you said that. And that's how it should be communicated. It should be communicated as huge, without a question.
I mean, it's liberating for women who have been trying to be considered an equal part of society based on not becoming, more masculine in their presentation, but actually doing the emotional labor should be as valued as, I don't know, making war or whatever guys do. I don't mean to be splitting it down the center here. I'm sure we'll be hearing about it in the comments, but
no, that's okay. Look, the bottom line is the data is clear. The data is clear on this. Women are overwhelmingly involved in caregiving, and women of color are way disproportionately involved. These are the people who do this incredibly hard, incredibly demanding work. There's simply no question. That is the reality. That's what the data tells us. That's what the White House tells us. That's what everybody who's looking at this says. And they have not been paid sufficiently. They haven't. This is you.
Caregivers. There's just a lack of value for care, and a huge value for being rich, screwing your brother, making a profit off the backs of your workers, and creating war. And this is so huge, this switch of values, that it's just, I'm almost in shock that we're here at this moment.
We're discussing
kind of thing you don't think is going to happen for decades.
Well, this is the danger, though. This is the danger. It could still get cut. This is the kind of thing that gets cut out of a plan, right? They say, oh, it's too big. Maybe we'll do this separately. Whenever somebody comes to you and says, well, this is a really big plan. This is kind of controversial. Let's separate this out and do it as a own package. Run screaming from the room, because that's the point. Yeah, that's the point at which they're going to get rid of it, right? So this is why the fight becomes so important, to keep this in the plan, to define this as fully and logically a part of infrastructure. And I'll give you a good example. If you listen to the podcast that Bruce Springsteen and Barack Obama did, where they have a lot of discussion. But one of their discussions is about money, about how much money you need to live a good life and things of that nature. And they talk about growing up as both relatively working class or lower middle class, whatever proper term. And they were saying, look, there was a time in America where you could make a decent living and aspire to more, but be quite happy and even fully realized as a working class person, because we provided the pay, we provided the benefits, unions were stronger, there was more there. And so much of that has fallen apart, right, in our society. And one of the reasons it has fallen apart is because we have allowed some work to be defined as low pay. That's just, that's a low paying job, and that's, blah, blah, blah. And we're just going to let that be. It shouldn't be that way. Teaching, nursing, caregiving, these are the basic underpinnings of a humane society, right? We have to have that. This is our social infrastructure. And so this is a plan that acknowledges that and says, we're going to pay people what they deserve to be paid, what they need to be paid. And in doing that, we begin to kind of reconstruct a society in which, maybe you're not going to get rich caring for folks, but you won't be impoverished. You won't be, getting up in the morning, working through the day, pouring yourself into a job and ending up at the end of the week, struggling to pay your bills. That's absurd. And we can change that. And that's how, in my opinion, this needs to be talked about going forward, so that it's a real fight. And that those who are fighting for an understanding of caregiving as vital infrastructure have the upper hand in that fight. It's the moral and appropriate, economically wise, socially good stance to take, but it has to be communicated as such so that we don't end up losing to the people who say, oh, it costs too much, or oh, it's a liberal wish list. Frankly, the liberal wish list ought to be understood as something that every American desperately wants and needs.
Another fascinating conversation with you, John Nichols. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. John Nichols, if you want to read more and his piece at The Nation, it's titled "Biden's Transformative Plan to Redefines Infrastructure to Include Caregiving." John, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on.
I'm honored to be with you as always.
You're watching ACT.TV. Stay with us. Thanks, John. Good. So good. This one's so good.
I mean, your jaw drops. Ajahn Poo, who was so vital to this, I'm going to try
to reach out. And
she's great, and she's very available. And I have to tell you, we've been talking a lot about this for years. And the fact that we're now at a point where this is real is, I was saying to my daughter, who's 17 and who knows Ajahn, I said, it is very rare in life where you see somebody's life work realized, right? That, what was the goal? To get $400 billion into a plan. They got it. And that just doesn't happen very often.
It's amazing. I host a podcast with Harriet Fraud, who is the wife. Do you know Harriet?
I know
I am looking forward to talking about this with her as well. I think we're doing this all week. Everything I'm talking about has to do with this particular part of this plan. Because
that's what we should be talking about. It's our job to lift this up, right? And it doesn't mean that we diminish the other parts, but we lift this up because I still think there's a real danger, a profound danger, that the Democrats say, oh yeah, this is, if we've got to compromise, here's where we'll compromise, right? And
we'll cut the women out.
Yeah. And
I mean, they can't get Medicaid, right? They can't get Medicare for all passed. But this is like it's like a step toward that.
Well, I'll go a step further. I will tell you this. Look, I've been a Medicare for all backer forever, always. And I want that, and that's the goal. But I will tell you flat out, this is at the level of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. If you get a guarantee on care, and we're not there yet, we got a lot of work to do to get to that. But if that's what's defined as a guarantee of care, and that means when you get to a certain age, or if you have a disability or whatever, you're going to have the guarantee of care, right? And society will make that happen. Then that's transformational, separate and apart from Medicare for all. We need Medicare for all. But boy, this is one of those building blocks for a safety net that goes beyond just healthcare. Because remember, caregiving isn't just about healthcare. It can also be about somebody who's 95 years old who can stay in their place but needs somebody to come in and cook.
Help them bathe, cook. Yes.
Exactly. And that's not healthcare. There's no, that person could be mentally and physically pretty together, right? But they just, you're 95, 98, 102, you need a little bit more. And the same with a person with many disabilities. There are all kinds of disabilities where people can do their whole life. They can do everything that they need to do. They can get around. They have mobility. They can work. They can do everything. But there's just some basic little few pieces that have to be put in place to make all the rest of that work. And if we can guarantee that, the doors come off. I mean, the possibilities are endless.
And this happening a couple months after the trauma of living through the Trump administration is also mind-blowing, emotionally mind-blowing. It's very healing even to just have the conversation. Of course, I'm not satisfied with that. I want the passage of the bill. But to even bring this out into the open as a conversation where we're still reeling from the Trump 4 years is.
But it is, I love your phrase. I think it is healing. Yeah, I think it is.
This has to go in the interview now. What we just did, this
I don't think we said
post-interview
anything
conversation.
that we would be embarrassed by. I mean, I think we should be proud of it. Yeah,
All right.
and I do think that at some fundamental level, if we're to have a just society, right? If we're to get to a place where we want to be, then this is a real step in that direction.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.